Hello! Welcome to what is almost certainly going to be part 1 of my coverage of part 2 of Oathbringer. Unlike with the first part of the book, I have actually read all of part 2, but I doubt I'll be able to fit everything into a single video, so I'm going to right now, I'm going to start talking about the characters and sort of the character arcs and themes that are going on here. And then probably next week I'm going to talk about some of the larger plot things that happened here, and some of the more Cosmere connections, I guess, and miscellanea. Um, so, without further ado, let's get to the main characters of this section of the book, which, for maybe the first time, does not include Kaladin. In a bit of a break from tradition, this very long section of the book does not have any chapters from Kaladin's point of view. Instead, we focus a lot on Shalon, still not as much on Dalinar as I expected, considering that this is his book, but some focus on Dalinar. And also a fair amount of focus on various members of Bridge 4, which I'm very happy to see, because I feel like Bridge 4 has been somewhat underserved so far by the Stormlight Archive. They're all very interesting characters that just haven't gotten to, their time in the spotlight. Personally, I feel like some of them should have gotten that spotlight sooner. In particular, Moash, I feel. I feel like Moash's betrayal, betrayal, quote unquote. Technically, Kaladin betrayed him, so no, not betrayal. But Moash's, I guess, dark turn, if you want to call it that. I'm still not sure how I feel about Moash. A part of me still just thinks that he's the one who was right all along. Anyway, I feel like his turn in the second book would have been more interesting and compelling if he had been a more developed character at that point. But he's getting development now, um, which is fine. And I actually really like some of the stuff with Moash here, and I'll talk about him a fair bit in this video, probably. But I'll leave that for later. I'm going to start with my favorite character, who is still my favorite character, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, which is Shalon. So, Shalon is getting so much fascinating development in this book as a character. In this section, there's like several main thrusts that are going on with Shalon's story right now. I would say that the two main things that are going on with her are A, her struggling and chafing under Yasna's renewed, uh, whatever you want to call it, mentorship. Because Yasna is very strict and very authoritative, and Shalon has now sort of gotten used to being a bit of an authority herself. And so being placed under Yasna's mentorship again is a bit of an issue for her. And the other thing she's dealing with is what I could only really describe as a rapidly developing uh, split personality disorder, I guess. Um, I definitely feel like as this book goes on, we are seeing, like, it's not even being drawn attention to by the text. It's just sort of happening before our eyes, which I like. It's a very show don't tell approach. But what's happening is um, Vale is becoming more and more a fully separate person from Shalon. I've talked a little bit about this in the previous section of the book, but here it becomes really, really obvious because Vale and Shalon start talking about and thinking about each other in the third person as different people from themselves. And they also start like sort of being frustrated with each other. Like Shalon will think something like, "God damn, Vale, why didn't she do this or that?" Or Vale will think like, "Ah, Shalon is so annoying" or something. It's really interesting because it's happened so gradually. Like there's no singular breaking point where it was like, "Oh, they were a single person before this and now they're separate." Instead, it just kind of casually happened over the course of the story, and I'm sure it's going to go even further than that. We've really only had like the one chapter with Brightness Radiant with that persona, so I don't know if Radiant is also going to become her own entity the way Vale has. I would guess yes, because if she didn't, it would be kind of weird. So I'm going to assume that um, we're going to see Radiant also sort of developing her own sense of self that is distinct from Shalon. Um, this has a lot of really fascinating potential for the future. I've talked about in the previous video how if Vale and Shalon become truly separate people, uh, it would be interesting if they make different choices in regards to the, I guess, love triangle that Shalon is kind of in with Adeline and Kaladin. And I also talked about how I'm not sure where I would stand on that ethically. I'm not sure how that works. Uh, but that's one interesting possibility. Another interesting possibility is the different parts of Shalon having like very different loyalties in a more important sense. For example, what if Vale begins to genuinely support and want to work for the Ghost Bloods? Um, what if Vale becomes a Ghost Blood, not just a pretend one, but like a true one in her heart, whereas Shalon obviously stays loyal to Dalinar, Yasuna, etc. And obviously Radiant would primarily focus on being a Knight Radiant. That could also be interesting. I wonder if we could even see a situation where Shalon starts no longer being in control of her personas. Like what if Vale becomes a force that can take her over at certain points? What if Shalon is no longer fully in control of when she is Shalon and when she is Vale? Um, of course, this stuff that I'm talking about right now, there's no clear indication that this is going to happen just yet, but it is something that sort of feels plausible for where as the direction the story could go from here. Um, she's also learning. Vale is rather. She's learning how to be a better spy from the, I don't remember her name, the former spy girl, who wants to join the Ghost Bloods. Um, which is going to come in handy. Uh, but I want to talk about the other side of Shalon's problems here, like completely separately from the fact that she's experiencing some sort of personality split, either two-way or three-way. It's still not clear yet. Shalon herself, like the primary Shalon personality, has a bit of a problem. And that problem is that she no longer knows what she wants to do with her life. She is losing herself, not just in her separate personas, although that is a major factor. Like there's that scene where she starts thinking about like, oh, I should make like a scholar persona for doing scholarly work, and then she stops herself and is like, wait, no, that's me. That's what I do, isn't it? Like That I don't need a new persona for that, do I? And she's not sure if she does. And I think the reason for that is that she herself has she's split herself too many ways, and by that I don't mean the personality stuff. I mean she's doing too many things with her life. She's juggling too many different roles, and she no longer knows what she wants to do, because back in the first book, obviously, when at the start of the first book, she like keep in mind, I think it's been like less than a year since the start of the first book. I think it's been like what 6 months or something. So in the past 6 months, she's gone from being someone who planned to steal a soul caster for her family and whose only goal in life was protecting her family, and also she liked art, like on the side, like she was an artist, to realizing she had something of a passion for scholarship and wanting to become a scholar under Yasna's mentorship, to realizing that she is a knight radiant and embracing the role and kind of liking the idea of being a knight radiant, to also simultaneously becoming a spy slash double agent and getting a bit of a thrill from doing it and realizing how much she enjoys that as well. So she has gone through so many desires and goals and roles in life over the past 6 months that she no longer knows who she is. And also she has some pretty severe imposter syndrome going on. Like she constantly feels like she is both as like a scholar and as a radiant and as a spy. She feels that she is in positions that she is not prepared for, that she is not qualified for, um, and maybe that she doesn't even want. And I relate to a lot of her feelings. Like this is something that I feel like a lot of, especially graduate students like myself, will identify with, some of her doubts and internal conflicts, but I'm sure other people as well. So I really enjoyed that, and I also really enjoy the weird relationship she's got with Yasna now, because of course, Yasna still is, without a doubt, a much more qualified, knowledgeable, wise, expert person than Shalon. And Shalon knows that. Shalon is aware that she should probably listen to Yasna and learn from Yasna, because she is not Yasna's equal. But on the other hand, she's advanced so much since the last time she saw Yasna that she feels like she's a lot closer to being Yasna's equal than she used to be, and therefore cannot quite stomach going back to being Yasna's ward alone. And she wants to be something more. Um, I'm rambling now because I love Shalon so much, and there's so much depth to her character here. So I'm gonna stop rambling about Shalon and move on. I just want to say that, yeah, Shalon continues to be uh, the best thing about these books for me. Okay, so that's it for Shalon. Let's talk about Dalinar. Um, Dalinar here, we don't get a ton of development for like present day Dalinar. He's just continuing his process of talking to all the rulers. He's bringing them into his visions now. He's met Lift, which is very fun. I cannot wait to see where that goes in the future, because Lift and Dalinar are like the two characters I've most wanted to interact for a while now. Uh, but that hasn't really happened yet. They've had like 2 scenes together, so I'm gonna reserve any thoughts on that until a later video, probably when that actually develops, I assume. So he's been bringing the rulers into his visions. I really like the Thalen Queen. She's a fun character. Uh, and I really like the character development we're seeing for Gox, since the last time we saw him when he originally became the Prime of Azir. But Dalinar himself doesn't get a ton of character development, I feel, in the present day. Instead, the real meat of Dalinar as a character in this book is obviously in the flashbacks, at least so far. And we learned some interesting stuff in the flashbacks. First of all, we learned that he didn't actually kill that child back in Rathalos the way that I assumed he had, which is nice. It's nice to know that he didn't do that. um, it also shows it's also interesting because it seems that Dalinar was having like some pretty significant character development towards where he is today fairly early on in his life, like long before whatever big horrible event is going to happen that's going to fully push him into becoming the man he is today. My prediction is that he's going to do something truly horrific, like some horrific war crime or something. um, Either that or he's going to kill his wife. Those are my two theories. I don't have a ton of thoughts about Dalinar yet. I'm sure I will by the end of this book, but for now, I mostly just have sort of theories about where his story is going to go, or rather, where the flashbacks are going to go. So I think we're going to learn that the story of his wife's death and how he forgot her is not quite what he thinks it is. I have two mutually exclusive theories. Either A, he killed her or was in some way directly responsible for her death, and that's why he wanted to forget. Or B, her death is not actually what he wanted to forget. What he wanted to forget when he went to the Night Watcher was some sort of horrific thing that he did. He wanted to forget his guilt. And the cost for forgetting was Evie's death, or Evie's death. Currently, I'm leaning more towards theory A, that he killed her. Because theory B, I don't know. Based on what I've seen, based on what we've heard so far, I don't think the Night Watcher could like kill a separate, unrelated person as a price to exact from a specific person. Like that doesn't seem like how the Night Watcher works. I don't think we've heard of people like sacrificing their loved ones to the Night Watcher in that way. So I don't think that's what happened. But it's something I'm open to as a possibility. Um, yeah, other than that, like I said, I don't really have a ton to say about Dalinar either. So let's move on to Bridge 4. So Bridge 4 finally gets some meat on their narrative bones. We get chapters from Sigzil, from Teft, from Rock, uh, from Scar. Uh, did we get a Lopen chapter? I don't think we got a Lopen chapter in this book yet. No. Um, and we get a Relaine chapter. So Relaine right now is the only member of the original Bridge 4 who has not gained Windrunner powers. And that's something I want to complain about. Not that he hasn't, but that everyone else has. I feel like narratively, the whole Bridge 4 become Windrunners thing happens way too quickly and way too easily and way too off screen for my liking. It feels like Sanderson just decided that they need to all be Windrunners, and then he just like had it happen and didn't bother to like write about it happening, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of how that's been handled so far. Um, I get that he doesn't want to devote too much page time to it because it's something that we all know is going to happen. So he just wants to get it over with instead of dwelling on it because he's worried it might be boring or whatever. But it still feels weird that it just kind of happens off screen for most of them, and we don't really get to witness we didn't really get to witness the moment when everyone realized it was happening either. Like that happened between books. Like at the end of the last book, we had like a scene of Lopen starting to glow, and regrow his arm, and it was like, oh, what's going on here? And then at the start of this book, Dalinar was just like, oh yeah, like half of Bridge 4 are Windrunners now. And like, what? Why did all that happen off screen? That's weird. Anyway, rant over. Uh, enough about what didn't make it into the book. Let's talk about what actually is on the pages of the book. So we get. So let's handle this character by character. Sigzil is really interesting. We get some really neat insights into Aziri culture, and we get another reminder that he was trained by Hoid. I think we knew that before. I'm like 90% sure I knew that before, because when he mentioned it, I wasn't surprised. So I think that's something that was established before. He was trained by Hoid as a world singer, and he has like this very Aziri mindset. I love the scene. I love the scene where he just starts complaining to Kaladin about how no one in Bridge 4 is following all these obscure rules that they don't even know about because they're Alethi and not Aziri and therefore don't have these rules. And Kaladin is just like, what the hell are you talking about, Sigzil? Like when it's revealed that Drehi, Drehi, that Drehi is gay and courting another man, Sigzil is like, but he hasn't like done the proper paperwork for it. And Kaladin is like, the what? Excuse me? I love that moment. But other than, like, while that's very amusing, Sigzil himself as a character still isn't super developed. I'm waiting to get more of this link with Hoid and how that whole thing happened. Speaking of Drehi, I want to talk about this for a moment. So, Drehi is now the second confirmed explicitly queer character in the Cosmere. I won't say who the other one is. If you've read Mistborn Era 2, you know. So we are getting more and more explicitly queer characters now. I'm still waiting to have one of the major characters of one of these stories be queer. So far, it's just been minor side characters. But we do get some interesting insight into how the cultures of Roshar view homosexuality or queerness in general. So clearly, for the Alethi, it's not that big of a deal. Like, no one seems to find Drehi courting another man particularly weird, and they use the word courting, which to me seems to imply that there's actually some form of same-sex marriage in Vorin culture, which I'm personally really interested to find out more about. I'm interested to see how that works, considering the very, very, very strict gender roles in place in Vorin culture. And we also get an insight into how the Aziri handle it. So what Sigzil says about the Drehi is that he didn't apply to change his social role. Now, it's possible that this just means that there is a separate social role of homosexuality in Aziri culture. Like, gay people have one like kind of paperwork to fill out, and straight people have another. That's entirely possible. But the way he says social role to me makes me think that maybe there's a bit of a conflation of sexuality and gender going on in Aziri culture. That maybe what he actually means is that in Aziri culture, Drehi would be reassigned to a female social role, perhaps. Um, this is obviously not how we understand gender and sexuality. We sort of view them as separate things in our current culture. But historically, many cultures have had this conflation. Lots of indigenous American peoples have had what we now call two-spirit people, and two-spirit is a concept that is not quite as easily translated into our understanding of gay or trans. Like they're people who fill either a third gender social role or the opposite binary gender's social role, but whether this actually involves a different gender identity or whether it's just a matter of sexuality or a matter of just pure social role, this varies and it's not as clear cut of a distinction. And I wonder if the Aziri have something similar, like a similar situation to that. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more about that if we ever do. But for now, I'm gonna move on. So that was Sigzil, and Rehi. I also really like the conversation where about Renarin learning to read, where Kaladin is like, Drehi, you shouldn't judge him for doing something feminine. I mean, like, you're courting a man, and literally all of Bridge 4 is like, what are you implying? That just makes him more masculine. Which I really like. It's a very ancient Greek understanding, or Roman understanding, I guess, of sort of the gender dynamics of male homosexuality. Which again, as someone who's studied this stuff and who's interested in it, I find very interesting to find in a book like this. Anyway, moving on. Rock is definitely some kind of Horn-Eater royalty. That's really clear from everything he says. Personally, I think he might be like the heir to like their entire culture's leadership or something. Like that's the level of importance that seems to be placed on his secret role. But also I think he might be okay, this is a wild theory. I think he might be part listener or part Parshendi or whatever you want to call it whatever you want to call it. Like the phrasing is very strange. It says that he can hear a faint beat in the world, and he says that this is, and he mentions that he has a particular heritage and particular blessings. And this sure sounds like he's hearing the listener rhythms to me. Whether this, now, I'm not sure if this is possible. I'm not sure if listeners and humans are sexually compatible. If it's even possible for him to be part listener or whatever. But that's the thing. That's where my mind went. I don't know. I don't know what else to make of that. I'm just noting it here, so that I remember it later, I guess. In this chapter, we also learn that Kaladin seems to think that turning his men into Radiants will be all it takes to protect them, so that he can never lose them. And he's really adamant about this, which is really sweet and also a really obvious Chekhov's gun. There is no way that one of the members of Bridge 4 does not die by the end of this book. That is so obviously what is going to happen, and it's going to suck. But it's also going to be a really necessary thing for Kaladin's character development, I think. Anyway, moving on from... also Rock has his family now, which is nice. Who else was there? There was Scar, who, I'm going to be honest, I don't know which one is Scar. Like, I've read this chapter, and now I know that now I know who Scar is, but the name Scar has just sort of been like a background member of Bridge 4 all this time, with no distinct role or personality, so I'm not sure if I knew anything specific about Scar until now. And he's not a particularly interesting character now either to me, so I won't talk about Scar now. Teft, we find out, has a serious drug addiction. Curious to see where that will go. So far hasn't gone anywhere, so I don't have anything to say about that. Lynn is the clearly the standout of the new members. She's a Windrunner. She's also, I believe, the first female Windrunner we've seen. She's gonna be interesting, but now there's also several new female Windrunners as well, along with her. Who else do we have in Bridge 4? Relaine. Relaine, I'm definitely the character I'm most fascinated by out of the current members of Bridge 4. I say current because I find Moash more interesting, but we'll talk about that more later. So Relaine is absolutely fascinating to me. Sanderson is exploring some really interesting concepts with Relaine. He's exploring this idea of, he's really exploring the idea of being kind of a traitor to your own kind, and a dubiously justified one at that, because as we've established, and as I'm going to talk about more in my Moash section, it's not really in any way clear that the listeners slash fused slash Parshendi slash Voidbringers, whatever you want to call that side of this big conflict, there isn't really any reason for me to say at this point that they're any more the bad guys than, like, the humans. And as a result, it's not like Relaine is someone who chose the clear and obvious good over the clear and obvious evil. He just kind of picked a side, and it's the one that his people aren't on. He chose his new friends over his old family, essentially. And that's a perfectly valid choice, but it's one that's going to leave him feeling conflicted. I think especially as we go forward and it becomes more apparent, at least I assume it's going to become more apparent, that the listeners aren't the bad guys here. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Relaine. What else do we have in regards to Bridge 4 before I... oh boy, it's been... Oh, that's a long video. I think I might cut it here, actually. I was going to talk about Moash as well, as like a major character in this section, but I have so many thoughts on Moash that I'm going to have to leave that for the next video. Instead, I'm going to finish off by talking about Yasuna for a little bit. So Yasuna gets some POV sections here. We've only had, I believe, one Yasuna POV until now, which was the prologue of the second book, which I'm going to talk about more in the next video as well. But here with Yasuna, we find out several things. First of all, we find out that she used to be engaged to Amaram, which, dear God, talk about a bad pairing. What was Gavilar thinking? We also find out that she has a bit of a temper, which she normally doesn't display, but she definitely displays with Amaram. I'm kind of sad that she didn't just kill him. That would have made life easier for everyone. But that whole scene was great, like Yasuna snapping at Amaram. And then I also like that she immediately recognizes that the insults she used were kind of stupid because she just targeted his closest female relative instead of him. And she tells Shalon as much. She was like, that was unworthy of me. Which I like, because obviously your mom jokes, while fun, are not exactly a moral high ground kind of thing to do. And we also learn a bit more about Yasna's relationship with her spren, Ivory. And specifically we learn that Ivory and Yasna know some stuff that no one else does. They know what caused the recreance, which I'm going to talk about in the next video, my theories on that. They know... Ivory says that all 10 orders are back now. I believe there's 2 unaccounted for, actually. I believe there's 2 orders at least that we haven't seen anyone from yet. So clearly clearly these are not orders that we are still going to see people awaken into. They're orders that already have people in them, we just haven't met them yet. I'm going to talk about that more next video as well. And what else do we know about Yasuna here? Not really much. We get a hint at her backstory. We get this hint that she had this incredibly debilitating disease as a child, and that she felt betrayed by those closest to her in some way during that process. I'm gonna try and find that quote right now. Right, here it says. Glimmers of memory from a dark room, screaming her voice ragged. A childhood illness nobody else seemed to remember for all it had done to her. It had taught her that people she loved could still hurt her. Now, I hope I'm wrong about this, but my current theory is that we aren't going to find out what the hell this is about for 7 more books, because I believe that Yasuna is the focus flashback character of the 10th and final Stormlight book, which means it's going to be many, many years before we learn her backstory. I hope I'm wrong about that, because I really want to know more about Yasuna right now. But I think that's what's going on here. I think we're going to have to wait years to learn more about Yasuna. Anyway, I think that's all for all the major characters except Moash here. Like I said, I have a ton to talk about Moash, so I'm going to talk about Moash at the beginning of the next video. And I'm also going to talk about all the plot things that happened in this section of the book. Because if you've read this section, you will have noticed that in this video I have avoided talking about pretty much all of the major events, reveals, and moments that actually occur here in favor of talking about the characters. And that was on purpose. So, in the next video, I'm going to go into depth about the 3 or 4 major moments where a bunch of stuff is revealed in this part of the book. I'm going to talk about some of the themes that I think are being explored here, especially in regards to the human-listener conflict. I'm going to, as I've said, talk about Moash, and I'm going to talk about some of my theories for the future in regards to both specifically Stormlight and the Cosmere as a whole. So, you have that to look forward to probably next week. In the meantime, I'm going to record that pretty soon, and then after I record that, I'm going to start reading part 3 of this book. I've taken a bit of a break here for reasons that I will also explain in the next video. So, see you next week then. This book is a lot. It's going to take me a while to get through this in terms of videos. So, see you.